Hello everyone and welcome to another WordPress API and JavaScript case study. I am very excited to be here with Jacob Arriola. Jacob, my friend, say hi.
Hey, what's up everyone? What's up, Zach? Thanks for having me on.
Super excited to have you. Now, Jacob and I got to know each other a little bit better most recently at the 2017 WordCamp out Orange County. They were doing a JavaScript workshop day. I was doing the introduction to JavaScript part, and Jacob did an amazing Vue workshop showing people how to use Vue and then, in the context of WordPress. And we've just kind of stayed in touch since. He also works at Zeek Interactive, where he's been doing production Vue and WordPress API projects. And that's kind of what we're here to talk about today. So before we get into the specific project, maybe you could just tell us a teeny bit about yourself as a person and a little bit about Zeek as a company.
Yeah, my name is Jacob. I'm a developer at Zeek Interactive. I've been a developer for about, 4 or 5 years now. Used to be on the business side of things, developed a really passion, love for kind of building things and building things in the web, and kind of had an opportunity to pivot, and I did, and kind of haven't looked back since. I have a real big passion for WordPress, for JavaScript, and for kind of just learning in general, and teaching as well. So I work at Zeek. We're based out in Orange County in Huntington Beach. We are a agency that's focused on building software for businesses and consulting services as well. We do a lot of stuff with WordPress. We've been around, I believe, since '95, so 25-ish years, 26-ish years. So we've been around for a while. So we've got a pretty great team spread out across the country. And so we're there, making good things and having a lot of fun.
Well, that is awesome and such a perfect introduction, and some really cool and very smart folks at Zeek. If you go and look them up, we've got the Twitter handle here, so make sure to follow them at Zeek Interactive. Give them a shout out for what we're about to get into. And if you're one of those devs who's aspiring to work at really cool companies and work with really smart people, maybe keep them on your radar. I don't know what the availability is now, but definitely keep them in mind as some cool folks out there, and you'll see that as we go. So let's transition into this project, and you know the project we're going to talk about. So I kind of want you to tell us what it is, and then how it kind of came to be from the Zeek level, and then finally how you as a dev got pinged with it and what it all involves there.
Yeah, so the project involves an existing WordPress site that we originally built a custom theme for. The client's name is Best New Jersey. It's a directory, a business directory. Think of it like Yelp, but very focused in around the New Jersey area.
Gotcha.
So they have posts and custom post types like events and locations. And so it involves a lot of legacy items. So the feature that came to us, the request was to really kind of improve their search UI for their clients, or for their visitors rather. They wanted a more like Yelp-like approach with filtering and live reload. But because we have so many different types of data, such as post types and all kinds of taxonomies and post meta, and they wanted all that stuff to be really happening very zippy and on the UI, we felt that a JavaScript framework like Vue would be a good approach to handle all that different state management. Of course, we could have done it in vanilla JavaScript or jQuery, but we felt as though just the level of state management, the level of clicking per se that happens, made it a pretty good candidate for something like VueJS. So we did. So the cool thing about that is, we didn't have to, drop the existing PHP application, the WordPress application, because we wanted to bring in a JavaScript framework. The approach was, or the goal was to not touch legacy stuff, but really just kind of use the framework to complement the existing stuff.
Yeah.
And to keep that keep the engine going per se, and not have any major drastic changes to the code base.
So let me hop over. I'm going to actually switch screens on you and pull up this little feature here just so folks could get a preview, and you could tell us again the URL that they could get to see all of this, what I'm going to show them here.
Yeah, for sure. The URL is bestofnj as in New Jersey, .com. And then you can go to /events.
Cool. So we're showing the slash events page, and what I'm seeing just walking through people here is you've got some live filtering. Notice that that's nice and speedy, and we could also search within. So we have some live suggestions here, and then that's going to be updated. Let's see, another thing I could urban show you the refresh. So very cool, and a very cool use of it. And as you said, you didn't rebuild the whole site in Vue, and we're back to you here. You didn't rebuild the whole site in Vue, but it was just integrating that, and then you said hooking up with the WordPress REST API.
Yeah, definitely not rebuilding the entire site. We left everything intact. Sidebar, navigation, footer, in this particular UI that you're looking at, or that you were looking at. We just kind of added on Vue to handle this particular URL for that. Now, as far as the API that it's hitting, it's actually not hitting the REST API. This site is using faceted search.
Okay.
So I forgot why. I think performance was the biggest reason to jump over to faceted search, because there's just so many different number of posts in meta and stuff like that. And this was before this particular feature request. And so our PHP, more heavy PHP developer, and I worked together to actually build an API for me to interact with and make those AJAX calls out.
Interesting.
But whether it's the REST API or something like this faceted, it's still an API that something like Vue has to talk to be able to make requests and responses and all that good stuff.
Now, I'm just going to pause you right there, because that's actually a very interesting point. What you'll hear from some folks doing these production level things is that maybe they're not hitting the default WordPress API endpoints. They're doing something a little bit more custom for performance wise. And in this case, you're using a whole different API, but with WordPress data, but through something else, because all of the indexing and power behind that. And I think that that's something really important to remember, that when you're going to build out production things, it doesn't mean you just turn on the default API and you're ready to go. You may do some custom APIs, you may put it through some systems or processings, but ultimately you are getting the WordPress data via APIs, plural or singular, and loading that into your Vue app. Okay, cool. So that's good to know. Now let's get down gritty and nerdy with this, man. Let's dig in and just tell us about this app. So start at a high level. Maybe one of the questions is, what's coming in from the PHP and the templates? What are you having to load through a functions or plugins file? And then when does it hit Vue? And then we'll get into the whole Vue side. But maybe we take care of the WordPress side first, since this isn't decoupled. This is in a theme, so you have that existing architecture as well as things in the PHP that you can be using and taking advantage of.
Yeah, and that's kind of what, some of the things that kind of leaned us towards using Vue was that it seemed for us to play really nicely in existing PHP files. Like you can literally write Vue in there. So in this approach, we actually have a little hybrid approach to what we took here. So this /events page that you showed, that's a page template.
Okay.
I didn't do a very basic, app ID and then JavaScript just takes over. I'm actually writing some Vue custom markup inside of there, and a combination of using, Webpack on the JS side of things to hook onto it as well. So as far as high level, we've got Webpack bundling all the JavaScript files. On the page template itself, we've got a combination of the Vue template as well as kind of a Vue ID that the JavaScript hooks onto as well. So that's kind of high level, right? So Vue or Webpack's handling the bundling and stuff. Inside the PHP files, we've got a combination of PHP and some Vue custom markup as well.
Interesting. And what were your reasons for taking a bit of a hybrid approach and including some stuff in your PHP versus having a blank app ID and doing it all with the JavaScript?
Yeah, two reasons. Part of it was kind of lack of knowledge as well, because part of it as you're working through it, you're working through something and it's working, and you may just not have a good reason other than it just works the way you're doing it, kind of thing. But a big part of it is this is being shared with the main search as well, not just /events. So the main search the main search of the site is not only taking events, but it's also taking the location post types and the post type and putting them into tabs. So we had some shared kind of components that didn't work really well inside the Vue templates that actually had to write just some markup inside of each of these PHP templates to kind of compensate some of the shared things. But the flexibility of Vue allowed me to do that. I didn't have to kind of like, I've got to do everything in JavaScript, sorry, and kind of write two different applications. I could have one JavaScript application and then kind of use that markup that I created in JavaScript inside of PHP files throughout the site.
Very cool. I like that. And would you say that if you were, we'll ask you about lessons learned from this at the end, but for this one thing specifically, do you think that hybrid approach is a smart one? Do you see doing that again? Or do you think once you learn maybe some more, or folks are doing more with JS, that you just take it all over anyways? Do you have thoughts on that or insight?
I think it's fine. I mean, use case is always the thing, right? Like in this use case, it works. When I start going back and refactoring, I might make some changes and just have, one div with like app ID or ID app and then handle everything in JavaScript depending on like routes and stuff. But in our use case for what we're doing now, I think it's fine. It's not really wrong. It works. It's maintainable.
Does it work if the JavaScript's turned off?
It does not work if the JavaScript's
so
turned
there's
off.
No search fallback. And was that a discussion or something that they were okay with or that had to come up? Or were you all just able to make that decision without the client's kind of impact or knowing? Or
yeah, I mean, we made that decision. We didn't specifically discuss it. There's a lot of JavaScript on the site already that so it's definitely something that we should discuss. Take a look at analytics, take a look at things of, is this something that we need to take a look at if we're talking like progressive web app kind of discussion kind of thing, and make it accessible for people with no JavaScript.
But it's live and you haven't got complaints, and there wasn't a need for a big in-depth discussion on fallback nature of JavaScript and stuff like that. No. Okay.
Not yet. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I think that gives us a good idea of the PHP side of things. And I'll just say, for folks who might be looking for this code, go check out the bestofnj.com/events and then play around with the search to see the features. This isn't code that's really available public-wise. So looking through the code base of what we're about to talk through with the Vue isn't really an option, but because of just how good a project this is and perfect, and I think Zeek is setting a good example of how others can start implementing and working with this, I think it's still worth us talking about. But without code to pull up and show here, why don't you take us through a high level now of what's going on within Vue itself, major components or features you have? How are you handling state? How are you handling routing, if that's a thing going on, the sort of big picture, and then we'll go down deeper from there.
Yeah, I mean, I think the obvious thing is, handling like a category, right? When someone visits the URL, they land, they get a list of events. The use case was, hey, I want a user, if they click, the food and wine category, to only show events with food and wine, right? And that's a very, it's a proven issued before, right? There's nothing new that we invented here as far as, hey, if I click on food and wine category, only show me posts in food and wine, right? So that's what happens. So if someone goes there, they click on a particular category, they click on the checkbox. We're making an AJAX call out to the faceted search library that we built. That means it's no different than if you were using like the REST API, right? I'm still making a call out. A GET request out with some parameters. In this case, I'm sending the category IDs that says, hey, go get me events with the category ID of what I just selected or what the user just selected, right? As far as AJAX HTML or HTTP library, I ended up going with Axios.
Oh, nice. Okay.
It's a promise-based library. I find it semantically easier to work with than using native JavaScript or even jQuery. Some will argue, hey, you already have jQuery shipped with WordPress. Why are you adding another library? I think the trade-off was, the usability of Axios and having it promise-based to be able to handle errors nicely. felt kind of outweighed the extra the overhead. Not that it has a ton of overhead anyway. Anyway, so Axios, an Axios call out to an API, and I get a response back, and now we're just in template land, right? Of just iterating through the responses of the posts I get. So the API sends me 10 posts back, assuming there's 10, so max of 10. With just a bunch of meta and stuff like the title and things like the city of the event and pricing, dates, excerpts, stuff like that.
Now, before we get down into the template level, how are you handling URLs? Like when they hit a search, is that updating the search page or the events page when they filter, or is that all happening within the app?
It's all happening within the app, so we're doing nothing with routing whatsoever.
Okay.
It could be a feature that we add in the future, where if you check on a category, maybe the URL updates to make it shareable, right? So if someone says, "Hey, check out this result I did,"
Exactly.
It's something one of our engineers, Aaron, kind of pointed out once we deployed. It's like, "Hey, it'd be good if we had that," and so it's something that's in the hopper to add.
Cool. Okay. But it does keep it a little bit simpler if not. And again, just because we are talking about case studies and client interactions are part of that, I know. And I can imagine something like this that might coming down the line if someone was doing something similar of like, hey, we need these URLs to be shareable. And why can't I copy and paste this and go there? I mean, honestly, how often are you sharing a search result? Like send them to what you want to send them to. Just a general PSA for y'all. But that said, yeah, it does add some complexities. Okay, cool. So that wasn't really an issue. It may be something revisited. And you're about to get down to the template level. So you have Vue kind of run in, taken over the page. Now, is there content already on the page from PHP when it loads, or does Vue do the initial rendering of all the content in UI?
There is not any like server-side rendering happening yet. It's something that we can discuss, but the site seems so performant that we're not seeing any lag. Like I even had to at first I was gonna do some like loading indicators like on each check, but it was responding so quickly that really wasn't a need to like add any loading indicator. I'm like, I don't need loading indicators now. So there isn't any server-side rendering now. It could be something if we may want to add if the discussion happens and there's a particular use case for that. So by default, the page loads. That's where I make a default AJAX call via Axios to say, "Hey, go get me events with no filter parameters." Right.
Cool. Okay, so once we're in there, how are you handling templates now? For those of you who know a teeny bit about Vue, we kind of have the more basic approach of having a file in your HTML in there. There's also Vue templates, which are compiled down right and are built and structured a little bit differently. How did you end up with the project taking your template creation?
Yeah, so inside the PHP file, I have kind of I have the components kind of as placeholders, like a filter component, right? But I don't have any data per se. I'm passing it down via props. Like this is a filter component, and then maybe I send down a prop like event category, right? So inside of Vue, I've got the actual component itself that is expecting the prop, like something like an ID, or the array of categories, and that's where I'm kind of creating all the magic inside the Vue files. So one thing that I need to do, moving forward, I know we're not talking about kind of next steps, but I'm not using Vue files per se. So if you're not familiar with Vue, Vue actually has a Vue extension file, so .vue, that is really neat because it has the HTML, the JavaScript, and the styles all in one nice file.
Yeah.
So that you don't have to get some of the use cases. You don't have to jump around between different files to manage different things. You can kind of manage everything there, and it's all nicely scoped to that component, whether that's variables, methods, even CSS or Sass. As of now, I'm just using Vue JavaScript files, kind of just calling in components via some of the methods that Vue has. Um, and yeah, so I'm kind of doing that same hybrid approach as far as the PHP files got like the parent container of the component, and inside the Vue files or the JavaScript files is where I'm actually doing all the templating and stuff.
So on your PHP page, are you ever passing data directly from PHP into a Vue template? Is there any data flow in that direction, or is it all coming through the API request?
It's all coming through the API request. The only data that I'm passing could be like a component header. So like I can have, one of the filter boxes, the header is event category. So when I call that component filter, I'll pass in the name of the header for that one, such as event category or dates or location or
Gotcha. Okay, cool.
regions, counties, stuff like that.
Cool. Okay, so you've got a bit of the component architecture, not using the full .vue. Let's see, what else can we talk about? Maybe we'll back up for a sec. What is your build and development process like? You said you're using Webpack, which sounds great, but I'm also curious, when you're doing your actual dev, did you have something to synchronize with your browser as well, or were you just hit and refresh? Because I know building a decoupled JavaScript app and you could use, the Webpack dev server is different than testing in the WordPress environment. So fill us in on the overarching, workflow and tool set there.
Yeah, that took me a while. It's hard. Webpack. So I come from using Gulp. That was
Okay.
my kind of workflow before, and so learning Vue meant learning Webpack eventually. And so I still don't feel like I know it that well. It's just very different. So as far as workflow, yeah, it's in Webpack. I never found a good use case to use Webpack, or a good flow to use Webpack's dev server with the auto reloading and a hot module replacement nicely with WordPress local dev. I did find a YouTube one. I'll send you the link after so you can share with everyone. There's a good workflow that there's a browser sync Webpack plugin that you can proxy in your local dev URL so that when you fire a Webpack, it'll actually load your local WordPress dev site for you to do your hot module replacement and your auto refresh, right? So that's local, using Webpack with the browser sync Webpack plugin.
Cool.
As far as development, we have a dev site and a production site. We use at Zeek a service called DeployBot.
Okay.
DeployBot handles the deployment. So once you hit a particular repo, it's connected to the repo, and it'll actually move the files over depending on your hosting provider that you use. If it could be SFTP, it handles it automatically. But basically, it handles the actual transfer of files, the deployment of files for you based on if a repo is updated. And you could do something like automatic deploy, which is what we do for dev. And then for something like production, we will do a manual like, okay, deploy this thing we just did. The nice thing about DeployBot is they have build commands. So
cool.
So things like the actual compiled files aren't in a Git repo. They are ignored. So we've got a flag on DeployBot that says, hey, whenever you deploy, I want you to do these commands. Those commands are like npm install, npm build. On the PHP side, we use Composer. So we have all our plugins and stuff in Composer. So it does a Composer install, stuff like that. So, all of that is off the repo, all the build files that JavaScript or that Vue is making is off the repo. It's built on deploy, which works well for us.
Cool. Okay. Wow. Well, that is a very nice workflow that makes sense. Were there? I guess we could start moving in. Were there other things about the project that were interesting? Lessons you learned along the way, maybe? I don't know how familiar you were with, or maybe you could share how familiar you were with Vue before this started, and maybe afterwards or along the
Yeah.
way? And overall at the company, like, was Zeek already doing Vue stuff, or was this kind of a first and that sort of lessons learned we could move into section?
Yeah, I always felt like I was the king of Hello Worlds, right? Like I would do Hello Worlds to death, man. Just like all the tutorials and everything. But other than just some, side projects that I just have here locally on my computer, I never really had anything major in production. And so I was really excited to like finally have a use case to say, yes, I can actually like put all this stuff to work. So beforehand, I felt pretty good. The problem is in a tutorial, right? Everything always just works, right? Because you have all the steps, all the problems have already been solved by the author beforehand. But when you're out in the wild and actually build something, that's where you're like, oh crap! Like, I can't find a tutorial that covers this very unique use case.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of those like, oh man, how do I do that moments? And so I mean, I don't know if it's imposter syndrome or what, but I feel like my JavaScript is okay. I was more of a heavy jQuery user that did a lot of DOM manipulation on sites, navigation, but never really building some heavy duty JavaScript applications. And so for me, it was really a bridge to like going from jQuery to using a JavaScript framework, going into Vue. And so in that process, I started learning a lot about things like Webpack, things about ES6. That and if you're using jQuery for the majority of your day, you may not run into a lot of those things or use cases, right? I mean, I can take an ES6 course and learn some stuff, but I may not be using it at work. So for me, it was really not knowing a lot of ES6, not knowing a lot of Webpack, and really learning through actually building something and those kinds of things. So for me, that was really, really great. And I don't know, as far as we talked about like why we chose Vue over something like, React or Angular or, Backbone or jQuery. But like for us, Vue, I've always found Vue is kind of having a low barrier to entry. Mm-hmm. Like it's, I don't want to say it's simple because simple is different for everyone, nor do I want to say it's easy, but I felt as though I had an easier time for me than, something like React or Angular or Ember. And given that I'm kind of, the only really front end developer on the team, everybody else does front end, but I tend to focus more on the front end. So if I'm gone or if I leave, I feel as though for a PHP developer, Vue might be something easier for a Vue or PHP developer to pick up and maintain something like this than if they were to use like Ember or React. They might have to kind of stop and really learn and spend some time before they can kind of dive in and service or maintain this particular site or application that we just built. So there's a combination of it worked well for our team compared to some of the other frameworks. Not to say that, obviously all the other frameworks could have done this just as well, better, worse, I don't know. But for our team, it worked ideal.
Wow. So that's so cool. So you had played around, had a little comfort before, definitely learned a lot, not just about Vue, but like I love what you said about ES6. Like it's one thing to learn it and know it, but it's another to see it and use it and have to use it in production or see that it is. And yeah, in the jQuery context, you're definitely not going to see as much of it, but in Vue and React, it's kind of the standard, which is really cool. And then at a high level, there was some personal thought and company as in terms of, usability, maintainability, long-term, getting up and running. I don't know if you know this, but like from a Zeek perspective, do you think if there was another project that came up, they decide, hey, let's probably just use Vue unless there's a really strong reason not to? Or do you think every project that comes in is a different case study and determination? Because there are pros, like you said, as more the team becomes more familiar with it, but you might have limitations. I don't know. I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that from kind of more Zeek's level.
Yeah, I think, for the most part, any use cases for implementing the JavaScript framework moving forward will probably lean towards Vue or give Vue the highest consideration, unless there's a a big reason why we shouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
But for now, it seems like Vue seems to solve to fit our needs most effectively compared to others. Yeah.
Cool. So again, kind of sticking with that like higher agency level thinking.
Yeah.
Are there, because I think a lot of folks, you hear, okay, I know that JavaScript is a thing and I could use the API, but honestly, like I could just keep doing what I'm doing. So I don't really have a use case for it. Do you think there are things coming down the road where you might decide, okay, maybe we're not building someone a full like JavaScript theme, but that you'd use Vue in a small instance or scenario? Do you think that that's something that was successful and Zeek will continue with to think of as a good approach within WordPress for certain features?
Absolutely. I mean, the use case for this was we have an existing PHP WordPress site, legacy. It's big. There's a lot of stuff going on. There's a new feature that calls for maybe a JavaScript framework, and we're able to add it. We've got it. We had another use case come up last few months that same kind of scenario. We had an existing site built with WordPress, custom theme, lots of stuff happening, tons of data. That there was a particular feature request that came down a pipe to build a pretty intense UI that had a lot of state management happening. And so we decided to go with Vue as well, with something like that, kind of taking the success of Best of New Jersey to say, hey, let's kind of take that same approach of we don't have to like drop everything or build it with like some spaghetti jQuery to like put it together. We can leverage Vue, but still keep the existing WordPress site intact without having to like start from scratch and like, oh, we've got to drop everything and go full-fledged all JavaScript in this thing. And so that particular project or that feature is going to probably release in the next couple of weeks. There's a ton that I learned from the New Jersey one that I was able to implement on this one. The cool thing is like I'm using the native Vue files now.
Cool.
So that's really neat. I am using kind of more, I wouldn't say efficient, like event sharing between components. So like, if you're not familiar with VueX, that's the kind of Vue state management library. And I didn't use, VueX in either of the projects, but I think I handled sharing state in this new project probably more efficiently than in the New Jersey one. Not to say that it's wrong on the first one, but it's kind of lessons learned. Like, and I'm going to have to circle back and go back and make those modifications. But kind of to answer your question is, we had a similar kind of scenario that comes up of we've got a feature request of an existing WordPress site that the client wants, a very specific feature that calls for some very rich UI, very JavaScript driven. We are able to implement Vue alongside with WordPress without having to, drop everything and really impact the existing code base whatsoever.
Wow. So what an awesome answer. You're like, yes, and we're already doing it. It'll launch next week. And the fact, I just want to like kind of use you as an example as well as Zeek, but for folks out there thinking about this, like you had some background, you did your research. It's not like you took on a project and was like, oh, I'll just learn Vue overnight after the client signs the check, right? So you had a little bit going in, but you learned some things and you also were able to implement a very successful project that's great without even going down into the bowels of using every Vue and related library feature, right? But then in the next project, you took what you learned, you took it another step, and then maybe down the road you take another. And what I like about this is that people can have success while they're learning without, making a horrible thing. And for any of us that have rebuilt something, we always want to go back and do it a little bit cleaner. We learn a little bit more. So like that's natural. And I think should be encouraged. And like, way to go, Zeek, way to go, Jacob, working some pioneer work here. And I think that, like I said, check out Zeek. I really hope that y'all plug them. There are some other cool people. Shout out to Aaron and some of the other folks at Zeek. Owner Steve, and really cool team. If you ever get a chance to know any of them in person, or you find out someone works there, or you're just an upcoming dev and you want to keep your eyes on the prize of cool places to work for. I know Jacob personally. I know he's got a really nice work life and family and interest balance, and is learning a lot in Smart Team and cool stuff that they're doing. So, let's give credit where it's due and appreciate that. I'll ask before closing, because we're just going to wrap up here. Are there any cool projects from you personally outside of this that we could point folks to, or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to come learn Vue with me and some other people, I do have an open source repo that we're working on. It's called Super Fantastic Dashboard.
In fact, I got that right here on GitHub. We'll link this up. Yep,
Yeah,
Jacob Arriola, Super Fantastic Dashboard. Tell us about this real quick in a few words.
Yeah. So this is just, your basic, hyped up to-do app using Vue. There's a bunch of people that I met on Code Newbie, which is a podcast community platform for people helping people learn how to code. It's called Code Newbie. Met some folks on the Vue channel there in Slack, and we all just started talking like, hey, I want to learn. Hey, I want to learn. Great, let's start something. So we started this repo. We've got some issues up there that say, hey, add this, add that. Feel free to jump on an issue, or if you find something, submit a PR. On last week, me and another developer, learned Vuex,
Cool.
together and on this. So it's open source. We're just there kind of to all help each other learn. Learning by doing. By building something. It's a fun environment. So if you're interested in learning more about Vue and want to get some good feedback and want to meet some other Vue developers, jump on that project. We'd love to have you.
Well, let me encourage folks, go get on that train, because Jacob has even helped me, and he's a very gentle and kind and great teacher and sharer of knowledge. So it'll be cool. Don't be afraid to approach him, even though he's awesome and great. Do reach out, and we'll link up all your stuff as well, so folks know how to get in touch. Jacob, I just want to say again, thanks a ton for the work you're doing. Thanks for sharing, being such a cool fellow, and getting to know you personally is great. I'm really excited that you have more projects. So by all means, like these case studies, it's not like, oh, we already did one from Zeek and Jacob. Forget what they're doing now. Like, it would be cool to see the evolution. So would love to have you back on again. And I'll just say, folks, that I didn't realize this till I was out teaching alongside him. Great educator. Hope we see more instruction from you. We'll link up that project, go sync up with them, and maybe we'll see some videos and courses soon or something like that. So Jacob, man, thanks again for coming on the show, man. Really appreciate it.
You got it, Zach. Thanks for having me.
All right. Folks, let me just thank you for watching the JavaScript for WordPress case studies, where we look at interactions between WordPress APIs and JavaScript apps. Please check out the site, subscribe to the channel, like the show, and if you have a project or you've seen one out there that you'd like to learn more about what's going on behind the scenes, let me know, and would love to either have you and your company on the show, or I'll reach out and see what I could do to bring them on. So thanks for watching, and as always, happy JavaScripting.